I was working for the company that acquired us. And about 2 years in, when the earnout period ends, the Miami Heat called and they said, hey, we're looking to embark upon a digital transformation.
When you go in and you take that job, was it always in your head that that could become a business in its own right?
We were building something for us to meet our needs, but our needs are not that different from every other sports team. We all want to sell tickets. We all want to sell food and beverage and merchandise, and we all have sponsorships, and we want to activate on them and measure how successful they are. Fast forward to today, 20% of the NBA are our customers. We have teams in the NFL, NHL, MLB, NWSL. We're about to close our first MLS team in a matter of days. We're just blessed to be able to work with all of these folks.
Hello and welcome to the Sports Pundit Podcast, the show exclusively for the people shaping the future of sport. Driven by my curiosity working within the industry, I started this show to host conversations with decision makers from the MLB to the ICC, unpacking their strategies and industry shaping ideas.
On today's episode, I'm joined by Matthew Jafarian, Executive Vice President of Business Strategy at the Miami Heat. Over the past 8 years, Matthew has led one of the most ambitious digital transformations in American sports, overseeing the Heat's approach to data, technology, and strategy. But what really sets him apart is the fact that he hasn't just transformed his own organization, he's helping to reshape the entire industry. Matthew is the co-founder of 601 Analytics, a data and analytics platform born out of the Heat that is now used by over 20% of the NBA, the league office, and teams across the NFL, NHL, and MLB. From fan insights to ticketing to food and beverage optimization, it's become the operating system behind some of the smartest front offices in sport. In this conversation, we dig into how the role of data is evolving in sport, why teams need to start acting like the billion-dollar businesses they are, and what it means to build a company within a world-famous organization. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Matthew Jafarian. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you joining me. If maybe we just jump straight in where I like to always start, which is just to get a little bit of perspective on your background and how you've ended up in the role you're in today.
Sure. This is my first ever podcast, so I appreciate the opportunity. And it's strange because I love listening to podcasts, just like everybody else nowadays. The ones that I listen to the most that keep me sort of in touch with everything that's going on. The first one I'd say is TBPN. I think it's called the Technology Brothers Podcast Network or something like that. But they're just a couple of guys in California that talk nonstop about technology. And I listen to them probably 2-3 times a week. And then the other is Acquired. The Acquired podcast is fantastic because they do a deep dive into big brands that we've all heard of and talk about how they got there, what their path was. And so between those two, I feel like I get an education every day.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Acquired. I listen to a lot of their episodes. I think it's interesting as well that you are listening to stuff outside of sports and trying to get your perspective from what's happening maybe in the broader industry. I think sometimes the best ideas come from taking stuff from other areas. You mentioned Acquired, so maybe that's a good way to frame this, right? Like if 601 Analytics or yourself was to be an episode of Acquired, like how would you make that breakdown? Maybe not quite 4 hours to break it down like they have, but if you were to fast forward at least.
Yeah. And so what is our origin story? We're just a business. My co-founder, our SVP of strategy and data analytics, his name is Edson Grefker. It's also a close friend of mine. And I were brought onto the Heat about a decade ago because there was a sea change happening in sports. I don't think many people remember, it wasn't that long ago, but sports teams were essentially mom and pop shops and they were run like that behind the scenes. It wasn't until very recently that we exploded in valuations and all of a sudden we blink and every sports team has a multi-billion-dollar number on it. Who knows what we're valued at today, but it wasn't the case in the 90s or even the early 2000s. Even in the NBA was sort of going sideways for a little bit. That's why you had some shakeups in ownership and you had some teams change markets. It wasn't necessarily a great business. That all happened relatively recently. And when Edson and I came on board to the Miami Heat, it was in recognition that we need to operate more like a professional business and the value that we entail. And so Edson came from outside of sports and entertainment. It's the first job I've ever had in sports. I had a technology background. I was building apps during that wave. A few business partners and I started a company in 2008 when the iPhone 3G and the App Store came out. And we started building apps. We're like, this is cool. We could do this. We know what we're doing. We had no idea what we were doing, but we were figuring it out just like everybody else. There weren't a ton of resources back then. So you just had to try things and see what stuck. We kept becoming successful. We got a little lucky and we sold that company a few years later. I was working for the company that acquired us. And about 2 years in, which is, when the earnout period ends, the Miami Heat called. And I was living in Miami at the time. And they said, hey, we're looking to embark upon a digital transformation. We're looking to change the way folks get into the building from paper and PDF tickets that are largely anonymous over to this new approach of digital ticketing, because it'll help us understand our customer better. Just like any other business, the Miami Heat want to know who their fans are. And we wanted to create a better experience that folks are accustomed to elsewhere in the world, like whether they're using Uber to get in a car or a digital boarding pass to get on a plane. So that's why they brought me on board. Funny story, I never told this publicly before, but when they reached out, they said, hey, Matthew, I see the work that you guys are doing. Why don't you come work for us? And I said, no. I said, no, thank you. I didn't want to go from a tech company to an organization where we would just be the IT guys in the corner and I wouldn't be given the time of day. So that's how I viewed it incorrectly. But they said, well, why don't you come to a playoff game? And so I did that. And I met all the people I work with today. I got to see behind the scenes of the organization and saw that the brand of the Miami Heat and Casane Center is as beautiful on the inside as it is on the outside, which is quite refreshing. That's not always the case when you peel behind the scenes of a big brand. And that was it. I was hooked. So Edson is building out his data and analytics operation. I'm building out the digital products and fan experience technology. And a few years in, we sort of partner up and realize that we can do something really special when it comes to data and analytics for our organization. Because I was gathering all of this data and anonymous analytics from all these transactions throughout the venue, and Edson knew what to do with it. So we were sort of two sides of the same coin. And from then we created a product that helped the Heat immensely. It helped us understand at any point in time what's happening in our business. It's like having an app for your business. And then only about 5 years ago, did that turn into a business that we helped other people with. I could pause there if you like.
No, that's all good. I think it's really useful context to kind of frame it of like how you came into the Miami Heat. Very often sports executives have gone from one organization to another. And so I think coming from that perspective of having started your own tech businesses in the past and kind of had that entrepreneurial mindset helps to explain how you ended up with the results that you did, which is you went into Miami Heat to solve a problem and to help them digitally transform. And in doing so, you ended up building a product that led to the formation of 601 Analytics. So I'm curious to get your perspective on it. When you go in and you take that job and you're given the remit to help digitally transform the Heat, was it always in your head that that could become a business in its own right? Or was it simply that there was no appropriate vendor on the market? You ended up having to build it yourself. You shared what you'd built with others at other organizations and they went, hey, can we have what you have? Because we don't want to have to go through the headache of building that too. Like, I'm curious to get that process and to understand your philosophy on it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's the latter. What a lot of folks, especially outside the industry, don't understand is that while we compete on the court, on the pitch, on the field, off of it, we collaborate quite closely. It is a small family and we all know each other. So if I see there's a baseball team or a soccer club that's doing something interesting, I could call or email my peer at that team and they'll pick up the phone and they'll tell me exactly what they did, what was successful, what wasn't, and what to look out for. And so we were building something for us to meet our needs, but our needs are not that different from every other sports team. We all want to sell tickets. We all want to sell food and beverage and merchandise, and we all have sponsorships and we want to activate on them and measure how successful they are. So it's a different market, perhaps a different sport, perhaps a different venue, maybe an arena versus a stadium, but the fundamental business is the same. And so when we were building out 601 Analytics, we used the opportunity at an MBA sales and marketing meeting. In the MBA, we meet at least once a year. And every January we meet in Miami. All 30 teams come down to Miami. And we talked about what we were doing from a data platform perspective. It wasn't called 601 Analytics at the time. My president, Eric Woolworth, who's been a huge champion of this initiative since day zero, has a close relationship with the president of business operations of the Milwaukee Bucks, someone named Peter Fagan, very smart guy, very driven guy. And he was building Fiserv Forum at the time. The Milwaukee Bucks were building a venue at the time. So the last thing they had time for is to try to figure out how to handle data analytics, because it was the first time running a building too, running a new building. So we said, we can help you do that. You guys focus on getting your building open and we'll handle the data analytics portion of it. And so literally we were forming an LLC, writing our first contracts, figuring out our deployment approach for the first time with the Milwaukee Bucks. And it's been a match made in heaven. And they are our R&D partner today, many, many years later. They took an opportunity. They took a chance on us. We took the opportunity, and it worked out well for both of us. And now, fast forward to today, 20% of the NBA are our customers. We have teams in the NFL, NHL, MLB, NWSL. We're about to close our first MLS team in a matter of days. And we also have the largest, most prolific venue developer in the world in Oakview. And we're blessed to be able to work with all of these folks.
Yeah, that's a pretty epic rollout in terms of the traction that you've got at all those different organizations. I think it's interesting because the only other example I can think of that even loosely resembles this is La Liga and Globant teamed up to create Sportian. And I think that proves that there is this uniqueness around the sports industry that even a huge tech company like Globant was like, oh no, we can't just serve these customers through our main business. We need to create something that's bespoke to the sports industry. So I think it's really interesting to see that kind of unique opportunity of saying like, hey, I'm solving a problem first and foremost for myself, but then I'm aware enough to understand that there's other people like me that I could also be helping. And actually, I assume that this means that revenue for 601 Analytics is now a new stream for Miami Heat that wouldn't have previously existed, right? So something that would have previously been a cost center in terms of looking after your data analytics becomes a new revenue stream.
That's exactly how we frame it. And again, that wasn't ever the goal. The goal was, how do we help our core business, our multi-billion-dollar business? How do we think smarter about the decisions that we make? How can we make those decisions more quickly? How can we compare what we're doing now to historical performance? Like often in our business, we talk about how does this compare to the big 3 years where we went to the finals 4 years in a row, won 2 championships. How does our business compare now? Actually, it's a lot more successful than it was back then for a variety of reasons. Once we figured out how to do this for ourselves, then we started helping other organizations do the same. There's a lot of attention on sports nowadays. There's a lot of big dollars flowing into sports. During COVID and recently after, the big leagues allowed private equity money to pour in. Big business. Sports is becoming a big business. This is very different from where we were a decade or two ago. So we professionalized the way we run our business. And a lot of what we do isn't just technology. We go into other teams and also league offices and help them professionalize the way they run their business, because we're privy to so much data flowing in. Why not take advantage of that? Do the same stuff that we've already been doing, like sell tickets, sell sponsorships, understand how many people are coming in the building, who they are, reach out to them successfully, but do it faster, do it better, do it in a more targeted way. And it's been game changing for us and for our customers. And the reason, we've been successful is because we have the same challenges as them. People ask us, are you a product company or are you a services company? Are you a consultant? I say, yes, we're all of the above. When you're a 601 Analytics customer, you get access not only to the 40 or so folks that we have on the 601 Analytics side, you get access to the entire Miami Heat organization. I often pull in our vice president of retail, Andy Montero, because he's the top of his game. He runs a fantastic retail business. He's got his own warehouse, physical warehouse, not a data warehouse. And he, makes his own clothes. We've got an in-house brand called Court Culture that our marketing team runs. A lot of these other teams, especially the startups, I've seen this a lot in the NWSL space, women's soccer clubs, they want to know how to run a successful retail business. Well, you're a 601 Analytics customer. You get access to all of those folks. Anything you need, come to our warehouse, come talk to our VP of retail. They'd be happy to talk to you for 2-3 hours. He does it all the time. And so that's why people buy into us, because they get the entire team behind them.
Yeah. So just Before we carry on talking about 601 Analytics, I'm curious to get a little bit more insight into you and how you split your time, right? Because you have two titles. You're a co-founder of 601 Analytics, but you're also the EVP of Business Strategy, Miami Heat, if I'm correct. So what does your week look like? And like you say there, you're potentially kind of straddling those two roles. You're potentially talking to other organizations a lot more than maybe a typical executive vice president might be within a sports organization. So what are the kind of pros and cons to being kind of on the phone and in touching distance to a lot of these other organizations? Because I assume the benefit is you're privy to so much kind of first party data and you're seeing all of these challenges in real time and able to aggregate them across multiple teams, which is going to put you at a huge advantage. But then that's also detracting, I guess, from the time you're able to spend directly working with the Miami Heat.
Yeah, it's a question that I get asked a lot. Like, where does your time go, 601 Analytics or the Miami Heat? The answer is both. Listen, our president of business operations runs a team business and he runs a venue business. Our CEO runs business operations and basketball operations. Now, your folks do both all the time. This might be unique in my role, but it's actually quite doable when you have a very strong team. You know, remember, I've been here at the Heat for 9 years now. For the first 4 or 5 years, it was strictly Heats. We were able to build a fantastic foundation, hire the right people to take on the responsibilities that I've been leading since day one. So when it came to building 601 Analytics, we were able to lean on the folks that we had to handle the Heat business so we could go do what's next. And it's an opportunity for all of my folks to level up, which they really enjoyed. It's also an opportunity to compensate my folks more than they would at another sports team. People in sports don't make a lot of money compared to tech or finance or other industries. And that's because they're passionate about it. That's because it's a great subject matter. There's perks involved. But we were able to unlock that code where we can well compensate our folks and they get all those other things. We love the opportunity of being in a stable business where we know where our next paycheck's going to come from, because that wasn't always the case when I was in the startup world. And yet we get to do all of the innovation that startups allow. It also allows us to attract the best talent. Imagine you hire the best folks in data and technology and product and data science. You're not going to keep them in a sports team if all they're focused on is a single sports team and venue. They're going to solve and automate those problems and they're going to move on to something else or go somewhere else for more money. So yes, we turned a cost center into a revenue center, but it also has made our core business a lot stronger because we were able to, one, pay for and retain the best people in the business, and two, keep them busy. You have to keep smart people busy. Like, they want to keep solving the next problem. And when you're at a single team, single venue organization, those challenges run out pretty quickly. Our business is very cyclical, right? We're in the off season right now. For almost every time the same year, the off season starts, depending on how far we go in the playoffs. And we're doing the same thing we do every year. Okay, now we have to prepare for renewals. Now we have to assess how we did last year. Now we have to solve our viewership issues. It's very cyclical. We do the same thing year in, year out. So it's pretty easy to get a handle on that, which we've done because we have a great team. And that allows Edson and I and some others to go build 601 Analytics in parallel, but I'm always wearing both hats. I can't view something purely from one lens or the other. And that is a pro across both businesses. You know, we help our customers on the 601 Analytics side, but we also learn from them. I have a NBA team that is just stellar at sponsorships, and we're not competing together for sponsorships. They're all the way on the other side of the country, and we're down in Miami. I can learn from what they do in sponsorships and bring that back to the Heat organization, and that makes us a stronger organization. And by the way, that makes all of the NBA stronger because we share in revenue. So it's really a win-win situation.
In terms of those problems that you're trying to solve, what were the problems that you initially were trying to encounter or were encountering? What are the problems that rights holders come to you with? And what are some of the challenges that maybe you haven't solved yet that you're looking to solve in the next kind of 6 to 12 months?
Wow. It's really run the gamut where what folks are looking to accomplish. Some are just building a business from the ground up. We've opened, I heard a crazy stat from one of our team members. We have helped open 7 of the last 8 arenas that have opened up in the United States. And so these folks are just running their arena for the first time. They need to know what's going on from an operational perspective, from a revenue perspective. They want to track their event P&Ls. They want to know how many people are in the building. All of these different things we help them do. So, one use case is just, hey, help me get my data under control with this new initiative that I have, this new venue. Second is, I have no idea what's going on in my business. There is so much data coming through. We have folks that are working on it and they do a great job, but I think we need to better understand the business value that's coming from it. And so we help folks do that. And that's where sort of our consulting layer comes into play, where we can help accelerate their technology and data journey, but also help them understand, here's what we're looking for from a business perspective. And those are the same business questions that we hear at every team. Like, we want to sell season tickets. We want to renew season ticket members. So we want a better understanding of who they are. We help teams build out a fan profile of who Andy is. So if Andy comes in on a Ticketmaster ticket, but he also buys something on our Shopify merch store under the name Andrew, we can tie those two profiles together and say, this is a 360 profile of who Andy is. And then we take that profile and we embed it into CRM for sales folks and service folks so that they know who you are before they call or renew you. And those are just some of the things that we do. And honestly, it's not rocket science, but sports teams don't have the full assembly line required to ingest data, clean up the data, which is often a mess. I love all of our ticketing partners, but none of those systems were designed to cleanly output data to the business folks. That's just not what they were. They're transactional systems. So a lot of the work that we do is just mining through ticketing data or helping our customers do that in a lot easier way. But I didn't answer your original question. How do we balance the Heat and 601 Analytics? They work in tandem together. The reason 601 Analytics is successful is because of the resources of the Miami Heat organization. It is a fantastic organization. I'm not just saying that because I work here. I've been behind the scenes on a lot of different organizations, both in this job and my previous job. Sometimes you peek behind the curtains and you see this big, beautiful brand and you get behind the scenes and it's ugly. And I'm not saying that about sports. This is in my previous life. You peek behind the scenes of the Heat and it's like, these people know what they're doing. And no wonder they've been in charge 20 plus years. So we have those folks at our back, helping us succeed.
So the second part to the question was focused around what are the problems that you were trying to solve and what are the new problems that have maybe emerged more recently?
Yeah, they really haven't changed. I think the consistent theme across every organization we talk to is better communicating with fans. We have really all this new data coming in since COVID. Most every team has shifted to the digital ticketing approach. At least every team that I know of in professional sports in the United States. Europe's still a little bit behind. Europe is just going through that journey right now. There's some football clubs that are going 100% digital. And I was just talking to a Bundesliga club recently, and they're happy with where they are with paper tickets. I understand why, but I think it's just a matter of time, inevitable and also valuable for them to shift to digital tickets because of the immense wealth of information it provides to you as a business. Imagine if you're a department store or a mall or even an airport doesn't know who the folks are walking in the building, an airline may, but the airport doesn't. So we have all of that. We are a ticketed venue. We know who the folks are that are coming in if we use the right mechanisms. And that's important because if I invite you to a match or a game and I don't know who you are because you didn't buy the ticket for me, like, you may be a fan of ours. I want to build a relationship with. And that's what teams have been asking us to do. Like, I want to build a relationship with these folks that are buying tickets on the secondary market, that are receiving tickets from friends, family, corporate sponsors. I want to know who these folks are so I can communicate with them and perhaps introduce them into the Miami Heat family, the Milwaukee Bucks family, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Hawks, whomever.
Yeah. And when you mention like having that consumer profile, right? So you talked about if I was to attend a Miami Heat game, maybe I come in on a Ticketmaster ticket, then I pay for something using a card. maybe I buy a jersey, whatever it is, right? You start to build that profile around me as a consumer. How is that unique, and how are you then able to leverage loyalty? I think that's one thing that sports organizations have in abundance that maybe a traditional organization doesn't. And so I would assume that a analytics platform built directly for the sports industry probably can lean more heavily on that than one that's built for a retailer or something like that, where the loyalty is much more kind of artificial.
I wouldn't say it's artificial necessarily in those other industries. Actually think there's a lot of parallels. The folks that started loyalty programs first and still do it the best are probably casinos. Very different industry than ours, but you have customers that want to be rewarded. They value you. And so you have to provide value back to them. That's what we do as a sports team. We provide value back to our fans, whether it's the feeling that they have when they're in the arena and the team's winning the game. And, they're able to tell all their friends that, hey, I've got season tickets. They can even value the ticket themselves. If they can't make it to the game and they want to sell it on the secondary market, I know that's not as popular in Europe, but it's a very big part of sports in the United States. You can sell it on the secondary market and they can get some of their money back. We have folks that will not go to any of the big games because they want to sell those 4 or 5 games every year to help pay for their season ticket membership. And that's their right. It's their ticket. They can do whatever they want with it, right? So let them do that. From a loyalty perspective, we do incentivize folks when they're in the venue, identify themselves at the point of transaction. So if you're in our retail store and you are a legend, which is a longtime season ticket member of ours, you'll get 20% off by identifying yourself at the point of sale simply by scanning a QR code. And in return, we're able to associate that transaction ID with that member's ID. So now I know that, hey, when Andy went into the store, he bought a jersey size large. And so if I want to reward you in the future with a surprise and delight moment, when you renew your season ticket membership, I, as the representative, can then gift you a similar jersey in your size because I know that about you. So it's all about surprising and delighting, understanding your fan. It's even about your activity. You may not be a season ticket member. You may be a fan that comes to Heat games, but only when we're playing the Celtics. So you're clearly a Celtics fan. So what if I craft for you a partial game plan where you have all the Celtics game in there and a couple of other games that I want to throw into that package and give it to you at a reduced cost, where you get to have guaranteed seats for the games that I know you're going to go to. I can only do that if I understand who you are. And in that way we can craft a better experience and communicate to them in a way that they care about.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Do you think there's an opportunity for that loyalty to extend outside of transactions that happen at the arena? Like, is there an opportunity, do you think, maybe now or in the future, for consumers that want to basically, the same way that they're scanning a QR code to disclose their identity now, if they're shopping at a retail outlet that you have a sponsorship with, is there the ability for them to declare themselves a Heat fan so that you can start to build an even broader picture of these consumers?
Sure. I mean, we do that now, largely through corporate partnerships. If the opposing team misses a couple free throws, they get a free Chick-fil-A sandwich, right? And they use a unique promo code that Chick-fil-A can tie back to the Heat game. Same if, Papa John's, which is our pizza partner, if the Heat win, everybody that uses this code gets 50% off their order the next day. I mean, then the corporate partner can tie that back to their relationship with the Miami Heat. There's a lot of examples of that. I've heard, especially in Europe, this is pretty popular, of companies tracking credit card data across different businesses that aren't the venue. More power to them for trying it out, seeing if it works, seeing if there's value for the fan. But we get to learn from every one of these teams all over the world. And that's why I love being in this business. Not only can we pull from all of the other teams, but we can also pull from other industries. Like, we're not the most advanced vertical out there. We learn from theme parks, from hotels, from resorts, from airlines, from cruise lines. We learn from all of them and we bring that experience back to us.
Yeah, in terms of talking about Europe, right? Like you've started to expand into Europe. You have that partnership with O2 Group, who have the Co-op Live in Manchester. How have you found that transition to Europe? Because I think traditionally vendors can find it slightly difficult. They may have a lot of traction with football clubs in Europe and try to go to America and find it really difficult and vice versa?
Hasn't really been challenging for us. I mean, first of all, being on the East Coast of the United States, it's quite easy for us to get to the UK. It's a quick flight overnight. We wake up and we're in London and we take a quick train over to Manchester. Co-op Live, by the way, is a gorgeous venue. Oakview Group knows what they're doing. They know how to build venues. They know how to book them. If you haven't been, I highly recommend going out there. I think Oasis is going to be there several nights in a row. I want to see if I can get out there for that because, I was raised in the 90s. So, I haven't found a challenge with it. I think where it gets really difficult is if you're doing business in Asia or Australia, at least where we're based, because then you have a significant time zone difference. That's the real challenge. Right now, our time zones extend from California to UK to GMT. So we're pretty comfortable going that far east and west. Australia would have to be expanding out there. We'd probably have to have a local presence of some sort so that we need to cover their events. We have somebody on standby while events are happening so that if they need any data or if ticketing integration fails for whatever reason, usually on the ticketing provider side, we can address it. So folks are getting the real-time data that they're looking for. So that's probably something that we would need to consider if we go beyond the boundaries of Europe and the United States.
I guess that's because you have that kind of service layer on top of it not just being software.
Yes.
I think on the European thing, the part that's maybe more of a challenge is actually the ability to create something like 601 Analytics in the first place, because uniquely the US, like he said, is much more collaborative when it comes to the off-field kind of innovation. Whereas I think maybe it's a promotion relegation thing in Europe, but rights holders generally are a little bit less willing to share insights.
I think that's partially the promotion relegation element. I think it's more so that the league has far less power and control over teams in Europe than in the United States. And the economics are different. Like I mentioned earlier, in the NBA, we share in revenue. The folks that are making the most money, the teams that are making the most money, or spending the most money, I should say, distribute to the folks that are under the salary cap. And a rising tide lifts all ships. That was really one of the main ethoses of when we started 601 Analytics, because we were primarily in the NBA at the time, although we've expanded far beyond that now, is that when we're helping other NBA teams, we're helping our business because we all share in that revenue. And we all get together annually to talk and say, here's how we can get better as a league. The NFL does a great job of that as well. And other professional sports leagues are doing the same. We all talk to each other. I think that's the main difference is in American sports, the league intentionally tries to make all the teams successful and has the power to do that within the league, where that's not necessarily the case in European football.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of spinning off other kind of internally developed tools or products, you mentioned earlier someone in the retail team was creating their own clothes. So clearly there's like a very entrepreneurial environment that you're sitting within at the Heat. Is there opportunities to potentially launch other businesses out of kind of what the Miami Heat is doing for themselves?
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out because 601 Analytics would be nothing without senior leadership from the Miami Heat who have incubated and supported this idea from day zero. I remember when my co-founder Edson and I held a meeting with team ownership and senior executives, maybe 5-6 years ago at this point, and really just had a very simple deck to say, hey, here's what we're thinking we can do. We have this great product that we developed for ourselves. You all know it. You use it every day. We could potentially be offering this to other teams and leagues. It was a very simple pro forma. It was a very simple P&L that we put in front of them. And they said, go for it. See what you can do. And then they supported us every step of the way and continue to support us to this day. So you need that level of leadership, of top-down support in order to be as successful as we have been. The label that you mentioned is For Culture. It's sold at miamiheatstore.com. And in our stores, we wanted a way to speak to our fans in a way that NBA licensees from a retail perspective didn't. Like, it's not all about Heat. There's a Miami element to it. And a lot of the stuff we sell and make a ton of money on doesn't even say Heat on it. It just says Miami on it. We get a ton of tourists that come to the arena and they go and they buy all this Miami gear and it sells really well. And we know our culture. We know this area. And so we tapped into something special there, and other teams are now doing the same. And again, Core Culture is older than 601 Analytics, but that was the support of our leadership saying, go do it, go figure it out. We had to become an MBA licensee to go do that. Like, there are hoops that you have to jump through, and we have the support of leadership to do that. I'm sure there'll be future opportunities. I know that we've talked about it internally. I've heard other groups say, well, why don't we do what 601 Analytics does? Or why don't we do what Core Culture does? And all of that's possible because of the support of leadership.
For sure. In terms of both those examples are ones where you've built and created it from the ground up within the Heat. I'm curious if you also have opportunities to potentially invest in sports technology and then accelerate it. Is that something that's also kind of on your roadmap or like within vision to you?
Yes, actually, it's interesting that you bring that up, because you don't know this, but I do lead VC efforts for the Miami Heat. I'm not good at it. I got to learn this space pretty quickly, but we have written a couple checks. We see strategic opportunities to invest. I always think about how years ago we were looking at compliance and how to comply with GDPR and CCPA. And at that time, our CTO brought on a tool called OneTrust. This was years ago. And, we said to ourselves, like, this is going to be a very good business, because we were a bit ahead of the curve at the time of compliance. It turned out to be a hugely successful business, this company, OneTrust. And so I started kicking myself, like, we've got cash. We could have gone and invested in these guys and probably would have turned out really well for us. And so since then, we've gotten better at identifying these opportunities a little bit more proactively and saying, hey, if we're bringing on a vendor into the Heat, like, we're creating an instant showcase for them, we're improving their enterprise value. We could look at it like we do corporate partnerships, but instead of a straight cash transaction, there could be an equity component as well. And so that's the view that we've been taking. These things have long tails, but so far it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that mindset and approach. I'm actually speaking to a couple of European clubs at the moment, and one of them we were speaking to about potentially launching a venture program. They referenced a vendor that they've been using for maybe 3 or 4 years that's about to do another round. I think they're by far the biggest rights holder that use this. They've given them coverage in top press. They've given them loads of product feedback. Like, they've no doubt helped this organization develop and flourish. I think that company has 10x in the period that they've been working together. They don't have any equity in that company, right? And I just think there's this huge opportunity, given all of the things you said, for rights holders to kind of own some of the upside that they're helping to create. It's not necessarily about being greedy or trying to take too much, but just saying, like, actually, if we have the opportunity to really help accelerate you and to develop you, and we should be able to participate in the upside alongside you rather than just be like a paying vendor. So I think that's a huge opportunity for clubs in the US, but also in Europe. I think there's a huge opportunity there. So
Totally. It's mutually beneficial. We have platforms with a huge following. We are a brand that has high affinity, and I'm talking generically in sports. Our brands have high brand affinity among a large group of people. Other companies can associate themselves with that brand. And if we as a team have skin in the game, we are incentivized to make that company as successful as possible. This whole world of venture capital has really accelerated over the last decade plus. Why wouldn't we play in that market as well? Not only through the brand affinity that we provide, but we also have cash in our books that we can invest in companies as well.
yeah, I think what's really important as well is that it's not purely like a media for equity type trade here. Like, there's an opportunity for you to provide really meaningful product feedback. You have, like you said, you have experts that really understand the sports industry. So if an early stage business is trying to get into sports, then doing a deal like this with, whether it's the Heat or whether it's another rights holder in the early stages, one that really understands what it takes to develop and to roll out. And I mean, you're uniquely positioned in terms of being able to advise a company on how to roll out across multiple organizations and leagues. Like, that feels like a killer proposition for you to be able to get into really good deals.
Yeah, we sort of give that advice away for free a lot because one, we enjoy this. This is what we do, and we want to see others be successful. It's a very small space. Like, everybody knows everybody. We like to help others. Maybe that turns into something in the future. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just a friendship, and we're fine with that. But I get excited when somebody reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I got a cool idea. This is what I'm doing. Can you help me get started in sports?" My person thinks, "Hey, man, that's really cool. Let me support you. Let me see how I can help you." And then if anything comes of it in the future that they want us to be involved, then we'll take it from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great mindset to have, is just continually add value and see where you can benefit people. And then generally it comes back your way at some point.
Yeah.
Nice. I've really enjoyed this conversation. We're getting towards the end. Is there anything you want to just finish off saying? Any closing remarks?
I wanted to tell you thank you, because we had never met before, but you called out 6-to-1 analytics, and that means a lot to us. I think the thing that sets us apart is we're not VC backed. We haven't raised any outside dollars. We're very old school in terms of the way we're growing this business. We're not looking for hyper growth. We have brick by brick built up a really successful business by doing the one thing that more businesses should do, which is to put their customers first. Now, anytime we have an opportunity to close 5, 6 different customers at the same time, we actually slow down. We say, is that going to be what's best for our customer or our staff? The pressure that it puts on them. And if it's not, then it's not going to be good for our business. I think that's what really sets us apart, because there are a lot of other companies that want to get into sports, and it's funny, we all know each other. So once you get like 2, 3, 4 teams, the opportunities look like they're endless, and then they grow really quickly. I've seen it happen time and time again. Good for the business initially, sure, but now you're spread very thin and your customer service starts to fail and everyone talks to each other. So, hey, I'll tell you, Andy, vendor XYZ, they're not delivering for me anymore because they started scaling too quickly. They got all these other teams and now they're not fulfilling what they initially committed to us. We do not want to grow too quickly because we see how others have gotten eaten alive as a result. And we can only make those decisions with the independence that we have from a financial perspective. We have a very simple cap table. We're 100% owned by the Miami Heat, and our owners have been here for many years, as well as our executive team. And so this is a long-term play for us. We're not looking to go anywhere. We're not looking to exit. And that's very different than I'm sure a lot of different companies out there.
And I think as well, like you kind of prove it with that mindset. It's like, it's the mindset of someone that works within sports and understands the ecosystem really intimately. And so like, what burnt you yourself in terms of you've had a vendor come on, they've grown really fast. Suddenly the service that you signed up for isn't there anymore. And so you can learn from those mistakes or those kind of failures that have happened in the past and make sure that you're not just going down the exact same route. So I think it's the perfect example really of like the unique insight that you're able to bring to the table because you're a rights holder as well as a vendor.
That's right.
Cool. Well, we can finish the conversation there. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and was super happy that you got back to me so quickly after sharing that piece of content that included a little reference to 601. Like I said before we started recording, I've been a huge fan of what you've done, and I've referenced you a number of times in various conversations already. So it's cool to actually be able to amplify that story and share it with all the Sports Pundit audience.
That's really cool that you've done that, Andy. I appreciate that. And if you need anything, lines of communication are now open. Please let me know.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Pundit podcast. I'll include more info about the guest and the topics covered in the show notes. And you can also find my LinkedIn profile if you'd like to connect and let me know what you thought. Visit sportspundit.co to find previous editions of the podcast, access the newsletter, and to sign up for our WhatsApp group and see upcoming social events in cities around the world. See you again soon.